me here.
Mark, do you want to teach me how to do it?
It's up here, and I will tell you this,
Just in
it's
case.
how you touch this. If you
Okay.
pinpoint it, it goes on. Now, you can see that clock is on, so I believe it is on now. Okay? So let's look up here just to double check. So start record,
And
please
then now
tap.
start.
start record. And
Please tap start.
the arrow at the bottom of the screen will turn red to indicate recording. There we go. So we're recording.
Okay, that's,
And then-
and I could do that, yes.
Then, same thing, when we stop, just go like that real quick, and that
And
should
watch.
stop.
Got it.
Okay?
Clock trained.
I mean, I've had times where I've pushed it and doesn't go. Anyways, I'm sorry to.
All right,
Are we
ready
want
to,
these?
to get started?
You
I'm
need
gonna go
these.
through those right now, yep.
all right, I'd like to call the Capital Outlay Committee to order on Thursday, March 20th at 1:05. And with that, I'll just get started and we'll do old business. Can I get a motion to approve the 2 minutes listed in the agenda?
I make a motion.
And a
The
second?
minutes of the
I'll
December.
second.
December 3rd and December 9th.
Yes.
Any comments or discussion about those minutes? Anybody have anything? Take a vote. Mark?
Aye.
Rich?
Aye.
Ann?
Aye.
Scott? Can you hear us, Scott?
No.
Let's see over here.
Share, looks like it share, is it maybe on?
Scott, can you hear us? Scott?
Oh, the microphone. Scott, can you hear us? Do that again, Mark. Can you hear us now?
That's turning off the microphone.
Oh. No?
Could be on Scott. Oh, wait a minute, let's hit share. That could be it. I think
So,
perhaps,
share is just gonna be documents.
just, screens. Oh, we hear you.
Okay, so maybe it was on his end.
Can you
Okay.
hear us now?
Yeah, the earphones aren't connecting, so I'll have to do with this.
Okay, we
Okay,
hear
thank
you
you.
well right now. This,
Okay, good.
okay, good.
So what would your vote be to approve the minutes? Are you a yay? Okay, so
Okay.
5-0. And then we'll go to new business. We're going to discuss a couple of items that have come up since we submitted the plan to the select board in December. And the first one is phase 3 of the comprehensive wastewater plan. I think there's 2 things we have to do there. One is decide if it goes on the capital plan, and 2, our thoughts on the project. So, Joe, do you want to just give an overview of what the project is? Because this was sort of not in the thinking when we did our capital plan, and then somewhere along the line it became part of the thoughts of.
Sure, thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, Joe Powers, Town Administrator. I know you have seen the latest iteration, which goes back to the presentation jointly, as you've said, back in December, of the draft plan for fiscal year 26 to 30 that was presented to the Select Board and the Finance Committee jointly. In that plan, however, there is a reference at the very end that says watershed, so WMP. So a couple reminders. My team is good enough to remind me that I often say words matter. They're right. And so watershed management plan is what we know the CWMP, or Comprehensive Wastewater Management Plan, is supposed to be called going forward, because that ties to the Department of Environmental Protection regulations, so AKA DEP regs, that were promulgated just over a year and a half ago, that will impact on all communities on Cape Cod for nitrogen abatement and the like. So we have it in there. It's referred to incorrectly, if I could say it that way. I think you have a member joining remotely.
Oh, did Paul join?
Yep.
Oh.
Hold on. Wow. From Italy.
Buongiorno.
Paul, can you hear us? Rich, maybe you can speak in Italian to him.
Che
He
fa?
would respond.
Che fa?
All right.
Let's see.
Continue.
Yep, continue, Joe. We'll keep going.
Thank you. So, I started to say incorrectly labeled. Let me just try to clear that up. There is a fervent desire from the folks in and around the area known as Great Sand Lakes for it to be referred to something other than Great Sand Lakes. So the phrase Phase 3A was adopted by yours truly for several reasons, not the least of which was to try to indicate that it is not a new phase, because there are no phases presently in effect following Phase 3 for East Harwich. That will come out of the rephasing that the Select Board Administration are working on with GHD Engineering. In fact, I think there's a presentation sometime before annual town meeting on that topic. It is, however, referred to by the Commonwealth as the Great Sand Lakes Sewer Extension Construction Project. And that's necessary because that ties to the original CWMP. So this project was envisioned in the original CWMP plan under Phase 8, and it says within that documentation, Great Sand Lakes. Great Sand Lakes itself is not technically a watershed of the 5 that we have, and it does not technically automatically tie into flow that is generated for the Pleasant Bay watershed flow. However, the existing CWMP allows for that flow to be sent to Chatham if the parties agree. So that's sort of some of the background. So if I interchange between Phase 3A, that's the local naming, if you will, the project as the Commonwealth and DEP, and more importantly, or equally importantly, don't want to diminish anybody, is the State Revolving Fund in the Clean Water Trust Fund, who have offered the town upwards of 31 million and change to help fund that project. The project itself is born out of an analysis that was done by the Select Board, I believe 2.5 years ago, in concert with the then Water Wastewater Superintendent and the then Consultant Representative Russ Kleekamp. And it was a response to the town having just under $670,000 in funds available through the county to study something that's going to impact on the projects particular to the county: housing, wastewater, other such items. So the Select Board voted to use $656,000 of funds available to design a wastewater project, the only project that had not yet been designed that was contemplated by the Water Wastewater Superintendent, Administration, and the board, and the engineer at the time, was related to Great Sand Lakes. If I could, the existing article, the draft article, talks about money to implement portions of Phase 8 of the Town of Harwich Comprehensive Wastewater Management Plan, approved by the Massachusetts Secretary of Energy and Environmental Affairs, and a Massachusetts Environmental Policy Act certificate dated May 13th, 2016, consisting of the construction of sewers in the Great Sand Lakes area, parentheses, Bucks Pond, John Joseph Pond, Kitty's Pond, Sand Lake, close parentheses, of Harwich, including any and all other costs incidental related thereto. And of course, it has language that talks about borrowing, contingent upon the borrowing being excluded under a Prop 2.5 debt exclusion, which presumably would happen at this year's town election on May 20th. The original anticipated cost of the project, like I said, was just over $31 million. The number that we're contemplating for this project, based on conversations with the Select Board, is closer to $35 million. However, this project does not include funds related to any stormwater work. That would be separate and distinct. Finally, I will tell you that the explanation that exists for this article reads as follows. The proposed wastewater collection system is expected to protect from the potential for nutrients to leach from septic systems into the freshwater ponds, resulting in degraded water quality. I'm going to stop there for a moment and emphasize, as the chair of the board and others have, that is not drinking water quality. It is groundwater quality. So this project is not to correct any seen deficiencies in our drinking water, nor is it related to drinking water. However, to read again, to protect from the potential of nutrients to leach from septic systems into the freshwater ponds, resulting in degraded water quality. The project is presently listed in the 2025 intended use plan, making the town eligible to seek reimbursement of some loan costs, as well as 0 to 2% interest loans from the Clean Water Trust and State Revolving Fund. So I think that's my way of saying hello, and that's the project,
Okay.
generally speaking.
Can I ask a question? I know that the select board originally voted on that warrant and then rescinded the vote, is that correct?
So, under the lesson of don't take any sick time, Joe, while I was recovering from bronchitis, they took up the question of adding what I refer to as my article, meaning the town's, not a petition article, to the warrant, and the vote that evening was a vote to not place. So it was blocked from being put in the warrant. That action was rescinded.
And they
So-
have not voted again?
Right, so what I will say parliamentarily is that they have removed any existing restriction so that it can be considered for placement in the warrant.
Okay.
They can now consider placing it in the
And I
warrant.
would just say there is a petition warrant on this topic that is non-binding, is that the right term?
Well, if I may, there is a petitioned article that does not accomplish, quite frankly, what I just read.
Right.
It is an effort by interested parties to, quote, compel the board and the town to do the construction project. However, given the nature of the language, I believe council has opined that it is non-binding in its effect, and that not the least of which because town meeting can appropriate, but town meeting cannot compel the select board to spend. Furthermore, it is not the vehicle by which the town would be able to get the money from SRF.
Okay. And it is a loan that we would be getting. We'd only be getting 31 million, and yet the cost would be 35. Is that correct?
Potentially, correct.
Okay. And there was some discussion, there could be some forgiveness, maybe, to be determined of the loan.
Yeah, so typically I can tell you from direct hand experience that we are looking anywhere from 0 to 2% interest. You may know that Phase 2, East Harwich, the first 600 households or so, are covered under that Phase 2, and that was a 2% loan interest rate with some level of loan forgiveness. For Phase 3, we were fortunate to achieve 0% interest, and I believe around 5 million in loan forgiveness. It remains to be seen what the interest rate will be and what the level of loan forgiveness, if any, will be for
On this project?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Just a point of clarification. Phase 3 is 300 houses, East Harwich is 600, Phase 3 is 300 houses or so?
So Phase 2 was about 600 houses. Phase 3 is about 600 houses.
And this
Phase 3 is about 250 houses,
So 3A is 250 houses?
more or less, correct. I believe the number's 268.
272 or something?
Yeah,
Yeah,
sure.
something like that.
Yep.
Do we have a map yet for that or not?
We do. I just put out there that anything related to wastewater, the town has a dedicated link on the website. So you can see, I think we've archived Phase 2 because we're literally done with that. But I think anything to do with Phase 3 and Phase 3A are on the website. And we do have, because the presentation,
Is coming up.
no, I think it
Well,
was,
they did it 2 weeks ago, right?
thank you.
Yeah.
Yep. And in that, there's a draft map.
And generally, what I heard was that the houses that are being considered for sewering are, I'm going to say, is it north? But above the lakes. Yeah,
They're not
and
on
they're not
the-
on the ponds,
Not on the pond. is that
right?
correct?
Generally, yeah. That was.
Right, and GHT, if I remember correctly, presented that other pond-related projects they do it's standard operating procedure to work in the northerly direction of a pond rather than the southerly, because that's how the water's
Water
gonna
flow.
flow. Correct.
Okay.
So for the first topic, in terms of should this, I mean, there is a line on, I agree with Chair, there is a line on
On the plan.
the plan, it has 0 in it. Should that have 35 million for this year is the question,
So for me, the question remains to the select board,
right?
not to administration or you folks. That has been in there since inception of the concept of watershed management, meaning not just fiscal year '25, this process or the next year process. You may recall that we were hoping to engage in a robust conversation the end of October for the select board and residents to hear. Unfortunately, the select board did not have a quorum. We still went forward with the stakeholder event, and information on that is on the website. So this has been in the plan. This is, as other projects of similar nature have been added before. I just sort of, I want to put out there what I've said generally. If this infrastructure construction project is not in the capital plan, it does not diminish it as an infrastructure project. The town's still going to be doing it if that's the will of the town. I think it's proper to put it on the plan, but there is no endorsement in any way, shape, or form that would cause this to be put on the plan. Sorry, Madam Chair.
I'm just confused.
No, I was just going to say, will we be surprised if the finance committee decides to put it on?
Can the finance committee? do
I'm just
that?
asking. I mean, there's stuff that.
Well, I would be surprised because I do not believe they have the governance right to do that.
Okay.
And just from a procedural perspective, if we get to town meeting and that warrant gets put onto, that article gets put onto the warrant, and it's not on the plan, can the town vote for a project that hasn't been approved in the budget? Can they vote to issue the debt? Doesn't it have to be an approved project before they could vote to issue the debt?
Technically, no. It does not have to be an approved project of the capital outlay plan. It does have to be an approved project of the town. And that is the purpose and the intent and the layout of draft article number 20 right now. It can be a standalone article that allows for all of the requirements to meet the construction project, most especially to do the borrowing and everything else. So, for me right now, it's somewhat of a parliamentary question of, okay, if the board does not insert this on the plan, it is still a project and there's still an article. The question will certainly be asked of the moderator and council when I meet on future motions meetings.
Question.
Sure.
So we're putting it on for 2026, is that correct?
Correct.
And is there some urgency, as in this money at the state is going to go away? Is that part of the drive behind it?
Not necessarily, but the urgency is that the town has contemplated this for a number of years, applied for, and is listed on the intended use plan for funding. If we do not go forward with this plan as it's articulated in the use plan, we're off, and we'd have to start all over again.
All right. So
Now,
that's
it-
really
Some of the rules
point.
have changed are potentially changing in terms of how much money you can get every year from,
Yeah,
That fund.
I'm gonna agree with the word potential.
right.
It wasn't a surprise to me or GHD or other towns that have been working on this. The state's been intimating that for years. And the point is, they relied upon their intended use plan, a phone call to talk about that. I do not support what DEP is talking about, nor do most of my colleagues in administration and management throughout the Commonwealth. They're talking about a potential cap, and a cap in a certain year. I'll just be blunt about it. I think they're naturally worried about available resources. They should be. There have never been as many wastewater construction projects on Cape Cod as there are now and contemplated, but that's because we never contemplated the DEP regulations that require it. So of course it stands to reason that presently they're going to try and do any approach to sort of slow down, but again, to continue on I'm being blunt, or trying to be blunt tour, if the Commonwealth's gonna walk away from the Clean Water Trust Fund and the state revolving fund support of these projects are gonna go away.
Right.
And we're right back to where we were 20, 40, 50 years ago. What are we doing with nitrogen in our water?
So the urgency, just to
So,
reiterate.
if I could,
Okay.
I don't use, I try not to use words like urgency in the sense that, if the select board did not opt to go forward on this construction project, what I will tell everybody in town is what we will have. We will have design plans available from a certified engineer on a freshwater phosphorus abatement, if I can even use the word abatement, project that the town can contemplate in the future. And those drawings should be good, generally speaking, for a 3 to 5 at least year period.
Okay.
So, to me, there's no lost effort, if you will. We had available money with no other available uses other than contemplating a wastewater project. This wastewater project is focused on freshwater and phosphorus rather than freshwater, salt water, and more importantly, nitrogen. So if the board opts not to go forward, little bit of an uncomfortable conversation probably between the town administrator as the agent of the town and the Commonwealth, but that's simply to say, for whatever reason. No different than if this went before town meeting, and town meeting opted not to adopt the question, then we don't have the project. But we still have the value of the design work. We still have the present CWMP, and we'll have the future WMP.
So if urgency isn't the right word, you lose your place in line.
Absolutely. Timeliness is certainly
Okay.
a very valid phrase.
So when you have your place in line, it doesn't mean, you're going up the queue, it doesn't mean that you're next in line, but you are close, correct? And you would go to the back of the line.
I think the accurate way for me to say it is that there were 25 such plans listed on the intended use plan,
Okay.
or the draft that came out in early March. Unless other towns in those 25 have withdrawn, we don't anticipate any changes to that intended use plan list, including the town of Harwich. So the dollar amounts won't change. The purposes of the projects won't change. And unless the town actively withdraws, the number of projects won't change. That's it for 2025 cycle. Those 25 plans are in the queue and are up for consideration for support from the Clean Water Trust and the State Revolving Fund of 0 to 2% and potential loan forgiveness of some level.
So if this doesn't go through, if you lose your place in line, you're out of luck. We don't know whether there'll be money again or whatever else, correct?
Right, we would have to.
That's to your point, we're back 40 years or so.
Yeah, on this project specifically, if that's the way it goes, but it doesn't prevent the town from having other projects submitted for state revolving fund consideration and for publishment on the IUP.
So our $656,000 that we paid for the engineering's still good, but a little bit in jeopardy
It's completely good and no jeopardy.
for
We will have upwards of 90% design work completed.
3 to 5 years.
Hmm?
Okay, thank you for that.
Scott, questions?
Hi there. Yeah, I'm just curious, because this project doesn't attenuate nitrogen into Pleasant Bay, what was the logic for applying to the DEP revolving fund for this particular project out of all the phases that we have ahead of us?
So I think that question sort of goes back to what was the logic in 2022 and 2023. And I think the logic at the time, and remains, is we have a unique funding source of county ARPA funds with strict conditions. The county would accept requests for use of the funds, but only if it impacted on major Cape-based projects. So we heard right away that wastewater was going to be a winner, so to speak. So that was point number one. What are we going to do with the $670,000? The further logic was, well, we can't do anything on nitrogen presently because we've got phase 3 in the works. We're reevaluating the overall phasing anyway, and we don't know or didn't know at the time is what were the regulations from DEP going to say. So the parties that be, present company excluded to a degree, said back then, well, if you look at the CWMP, if you look at the remaining, technically speaking, 5 phases, phases 4 through 8, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, yep, there we go. The phase 3 construction project, when you look at that enabling article, talked about the extension of East Harwich sewer system was impacting upon the 2013-2016 CWMP phase 3 and portions of phase 8. So the nitrogen contract for phase 3 touched upon phase 8. When you look at that now, Great Sand Lakes is in phase 8. So that was sort of all the logic to it. And the town contemplated, and this is something that I learned from reading and going over past votes, having not been here. But that comprehensive plan for phase 8 talked about all the watersheds and sub-watersheds and freshwater bodies and other bodies. I'm going to add, it also contemplated at the time the town of Harwich having its own treatment facility. And so specifically when you read phase 8, and that is, I've made that available publicly, I think it was in the board's packet 2 weeks ago. When you look at that page of the CWMP, when it talks about phase 8, it said that effluent from Great Sand Lakes could go with Pleasant Bay to be treated by, somebody next door signed it, right?
Maybe.
Can be treated in Chatham if Chatham agrees. It also could have been treated at the Harwich treatment plant if we had one.
And did the select board need to vote to file that application for the Great Sand Lake project with DEP?
Yes, and the vote occurred last spring, I believe.
Okay, thank you. And the only other thing I'd mention is that the Finance Committee 2 days ago did vote in favor of not the petition article, but the town's article for this project by a vote of 5-2 in favor.
So as far as putting it on the capital plan, I guess I would think our recommendation is if the select board, we can't recommend, is that what you're going to tell us?
No, I'd like to recommend
Okay.
an action to the committee.
Okay.
This project is listed and does not have a dollar amount. The article has a dollar amount, and I would recommend that you list the amount of $35 million under the watershed phase 3A, so-called, sewer extension design and construction. $35 million fiscal year 2026. I'd have to do the math to tell you then what the full annual total for 2026 would be, but we might have more projects.
Let's hope not.
Madam Chair, I'm
Yes.
sorry. Madam Chair, if I could ask Joe a question. Just explain to me again how, I see the figure 32 million all the time, and now we're saying 35 million. What causes the difference in that?
So basically the design work that's being done by GHD. So for the longest time, we were looking at 31 point something million dollars.
Right.
And that holds as long as it can. The financial assumptions, I think the best way I can say it, essentially outpace the design work. And because of the requirements for the applications and all that, you need to come up with a number. You very rarely, if ever, hit it, and more on that in a moment if I could. But you want to have a clear understanding of the absolute floor. And so the 31 point something million was the absolute floor. So what would change it, or what has changed it for other projects, is now that they have a better sense of design, what is the level of stormwater work that the town needs to do? Now, for stormwater, my direct, Link Hooper has his direct, Brian Albee. The town's looking at about $1 million for stormwater work, because we're only talking about 250 plus houses. And we're talking about an area of town that already has well-built stormwater, and we have funding for that. And so that could be a future article in a special or an annual where we're allowing the use of Chapter 90 money to do the stormwater. So even though the construction number is massive, and that's my word, no one else's, but when you talk about an original figure of 42 million for East Harwich, which was, 600 plus houses, and you're now talking 260 plus houses and 31 to 35 million, it's the complexity of where they're working. Quite frankly.
Right.
So that's where the number starts out, and it gets refined the more they design and the closer they get. Now, GHD was rounding up to over 32 million. Now, and this goes back to their presentation a few weeks ago, as Madam Chair said. So they had to come up with a number that would go into the SRF application, and it's never going to be the full amount. As they further evaluated, they had to reevaluate, as we would want them to do, their assumptions. So let's look at what's changed in the last 8 months. Tariffs.
Yeah.
And tariffs have changed in the last 8 minutes, perhaps. Tariffs are changing all the time, but that puts a complexity on what is the price of steel going to be for this project going forward. So that was one of their contingencies. They talked about increasing their assumptions on that cost, hence the higher cost. So what we're talking about is a most likely $35 million construction project, 31 of which is eligible for reimbursement, and the delta would be borne by the town. Now, for me, in all that I look at and survey, I'm gonna use air quotes to say the good news is this infrastructure project's going to hit the town directly for about 4 or 5 million. The overall project of 35 million could enjoy some level of reimbursement and some level of low interest, theoretically.
I would just,
5 million is what? I get the 31.
So sorry, 4 million. So 4 million in play. Now, if I could, one last point. So let's go back to phase 3, right? So that was the last biggest phase related to nitrogen abatement, Pleasant Bay watershed, effluent, all the ways we'd say it for East Harwich. Remember that in 2023, we had an article that appropriated $42 million. And then in 2024, we augmented that with another roughly, call it 10 million. Meaning we have $54 million appropriated for a $42 million project, 42 million of which is covered by 0% interest. We always want to have more in appropriation than the project. So I then took the extraordinary step, and the board didn't say no, of rounding it up even higher to 35 million. Now, if it goes over 35 million, or well, we wouldn't know it then, if we get intelligence, information and all that from the vendors and what have you, we could have a supplemental article. The 31 million number is never going to change with SRF. That's where we locked in as our floor for potential for reimbursement.
I think the other thing that GHD said was, in terms of the cost, that the digging on Queen Anne is much more complicated because you have water, electricity, and gas lines that helped with the increased cost. And they were still trying to figure out how many pumps, grinders or pumps, they were going to need.
No, so we still think it's going to be just one pump station.
Okay.
But how many grinder
Grinders,
pumps would
right,
we need to
right.
be used?
They were still assessing
And-
the homes.
And that's what happens as you expand, as you finalize your design work. And if I could add, specifically, because when engineers get shook, I notice they are the most even-keeled individuals in the world, and what they got shook by is, okay, we knew you had gas infrastructure on the road. We didn't know you had two different gas infrastructures on the road.
Oh, I didn't know that either. Yeah,
And that's an unusual condition that they discovered. The additional cost, however, is something I'm familiar with in other towns. So to ameliorate those conditions, they're looking at directional drilling. Directional drilling is a great resource. That's not cheap. And that's
And they
to try
also have to
that.
go through that, or they don't want to go through that rotary to
Hence
get
the
the
direction.
affluent to Chatham, so that's a whole other thing, and how do you do a curved pipe and all that kind. So there were a lot of other things
Yep.
that sort of drove the
Engineering,
cost.
it's not
Yeah,
a simple project.
right.
Not at all.
Wasn't an easy area to do, is
Got
what
it.
they said. Okay, so let's see, can we all agree with Joe that the recommendation to the select board would to be to put 35 million on the capital plan for fiscal year '26? Can I?
So if I could, Madam Chair, what I'm hoping to do is preserve my rights and responsibilities as town administrator under the charter. I have to build a capital plan. We have talked extensively, both at joint meetings and your own meetings. So it's my recommendation, I'm adding 35 million.
Thank you.
Will you back me up on that, so to
Yes,
speak?
so can we have a motion to back Joe up on his recommendation? How's that?
To add 35
To
million to my plan,
35
yep.
million in fiscal year '26. Can I get a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Can I get a second?
Second,
Any discussion? Can we take a vote? Mark?
Aye.
Rich, aye.
and I.
Scott?
Aye.
And I don't know if Paul can hear us.
P,
He can't, yeah. And I'm an aye, so
we got a
let's call it 5-0.
Did you second?
Yes, I did.
Thank you.
I think I would like us to also vote on what we think about the project, just our opinions for the select board, right?
Madam Chair, if I could, I encourage that.
Okay.
I'm not going to participate.
Okay.
And if I could also use this opportunity to grab my water.
Yeah.
I think that's a wonderful exercise by you folks, and I think it can go a long way towards the discussion. I cannot enjoy the habit of opinion. I definitely think you folks can, because that's the crux of your charge.
Okay.
Got
So I'm
it.
going to step away for a moment.
So why don't we start with a motion to make a recommendation and then second it, and then we'll have a discussion if that makes sense. So can I get a motion to make a recommendation for approval, let's say approval,
To the board is,
to recommend to the Board of Selectmen approval of this project?
That's our motion.
That's our motion. Do I have a motion,
Do you need
first
to
of
put a
all?
dollar figure with that?
For 35 million.
Okay.
I'll make a motion.
Do I have a second?
I second the motion.
Okay, can we have discussion now? Okay. I'm going to start, just because I have a lot of opinions on this and I've kind of been paying attention to it. I personally am a no on this, and I will give my reasons why, and you guys can decide what you want to do, but first of all, I don't think it meets the objective of nitrogen removal, which was our original plan with this whole project. And I feel that the costs are extremely high. At 275 homes for 35 million, it's $130,000 a home. That's somewhere 2 to 3 times higher than what we've paid in phase 2 and phase 3. And I keep saying, we could offer up alternative septic systems at $50,000 a piece and do it for 15 million. I just don't. I think it's a big cost to do it, and we don't know. There's no guarantee what we're going to get back. I also believe that we have to renegotiate affluent contracts with Chatham, and we already have a school system issue that we're trying to negotiate with Chatham, and I don't know that we want that many pots and, in the kitchen with, I don't know how we want to do that with Chatham. And then my final reason for voting no is debt capacity. We have to lock up this 35 million for 3 to 6 years until they finish the project before we can unlock it for whatever we want to do in the future. And we're not going to get it all back in terms of debt capacity, because we're going to have to issue some debt, maybe in the neighborhood of $20 or $25 million. So I just don't think I don't think it's the right time to be doing this, and that's going to be my vote. But I will let all of you, Rich.
My idea is the Capital Outlay Committee is not a technical committee, and I don't think it's proper for us to say that it doesn't achieve something from an engineering standpoint. I don't believe that. I think the issue that we have is, can we afford it? And the answer is yes, we can afford it. Also, we don't have a debt schedule in front of us to say, would this debt be replacing other debt? So maybe it's a smooth transition, or in fact, less than what we're removing. I would vote for it from all the conversations that we've had, from the understanding of those who are in the know, it should be there. Whether it's voted for or used is something else. But I think the appearance should be there and that we should vouch for using it. That's probably the only thing. I mean, I'm a vote yes.
Okay.
So on my comments, again, it's about this debt piece. We still don't know what money's going where, right? That was one of our last things, right? So on the debt schedule, we're a little blind on it. And we're at the mercy of a decision made probably in 2016 of these 25 projects, right? I can't have a good discussion because I don't know what the risk is of falling off that list. You know, that's the other kind of complicated piece of it. Then that money at 0 to 2% is never available again, and if this is then deemed something that we have to do, is then the, you know, a debt load going to be at 6 or some other percentage. I would only be a yes to hold that place, to have that money at 0 to 2%. I don't think it's a commitment completely to the project yet, and I would be with you as well, because we haven't sat through, we know more about police cruisers at $50,000 a piece than we do about this project at 31 to 35 million. So I would only vote yes because I think it's this keep in place for relatively cheap money, but I would want more information, like what comes on and what comes off, but we may never get that. You say that every year.
You also know it's never going to go down.
It's never going to go
The
down.
costs will
Right.
never go.
It's going to go up.
It's got to go up, and we talked about, or Joe talked about tariffs. I mean, this is a major project that will be impacted by.
Yeah,
It's not going to go down.
anything in construction. But my comments about keeping place in line,
Right.
not about the technical feasibility.
Where you got?
Excuse me, I'm in favor of the project for basically the same reasons Ann said. Running the risk of losing the funding. I'm going to take a worst case. A lot of funding could go away. Worst case, with budget deficits. The other thing that Mark Drainville, what an appropriate name for this project, did mention is that there's a 20-year, Joe, if he's over here, he could confirm this, there's a 20-year clock. It hasn't started to click yet. And the next phase they're going over to is in West Harwich. You can't do anything there yet. There's no, just
No place.
next year they're going to put in the pipe on 28. Still not a place to send it. So I think you potentially have 3 to 5 years to get all our ducks in order before we have to start the next phase. So I'm in favor of it. I do think that if we chose not to, that is, I don't know a lot about this, but the people who live there could start some type of movement. And I think, my sense is it's been kind of promised to them over the years, and I'm in favor of it. I think we should go ahead. Primarily, I don't want to lose the money.
It's a place in line, really.
Scott, what do you got?
Your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm voting yes, because of the opportunity of the revolving fund, low-cost money, and potential loan forgiveness. I also think that the criteria of the state's watershed plan is flawed, and I think that protection of freshwater resources is just as important as the Pleasant Bay and other saltwater resources. So I'm voting yes.
Okay.
Okay.
So it's 4-1.
Who wants to take the vote?
Oh. I thought we did, but okay. Mark,
Aye.
Rich,
Aye.
Ann,
Aye.
Scott,
Aye.
and I'm a no.
And just so I take the minutes, to recommend to the select board that this project go forward, just to put it in.
Yeah, just
Is
our-
that the type of
And our
terminology?
comments be included, or,
I wouldn't do that.
whatever, okay.
It's just in terms of minutes, I'd
Got it,
stick to the,
got it,
yeah.
got
Yeah, I think generally the approval was based on the funding, and that was the major reason.
Because we didn't have
Right.
any information. Yep.
All right, so I think we're done with Phase 3. Can we move on to Saquatucket Harbor
I'm gonna
Bulkhead
go out and order
Project?
dinner first.
What's that?
We're doing
I was gonna
good.
Go
I
outside
have a
and order
hard
dinner.
stop about quarter.
Yeah, okay.
It's not gonna be that long.
We're gonna get through
We're
this.
gonna get there,
Yeah.
okay.
Saquatucket.
Okay, so, do you want to start this, Joe? You want?
Well, yeah, let me strike the first blow. The ask in fiscal year 2026 is for the design and permitting of the future bulkhead replacement project. So I know firsthand what retired harbor master John Rondone did, said, and thought before he left. At your request, he did evaluate it, and the recommendation was you might get a couple more years out of this bulkhead. And so what that tells me is we have the time, we have the resources to fund the design work and the potential permitting ahead of a significant construction project. And design and permitting does not bind anybody, as we just heard on the Great Sand Lakes. Just because you pay for the design does not mean you are bound to do the construction project. So I urge that this project remain on the plan because it is seeking to do the design work that is needed on a bulkhead replacement. Most especially, this is a year where the funds are available. So there's a need from our former retired harbor master that I know our new harbor master, John Harker, also endorses and supports, as does the Waterways Committee. So I would urge that this remain on. And again, just, sort of going between you folks as a committee and my role here, I will urge the same of the select board, that it remain on the plan for the dollar amount presented there and for the purposes stated. There is no doubt that there needs to be work done on the Saquatucket bulkhead, and that work is going to be informed by the design work that's being sought in this ask.
Yes.
Why are we discussing this?
Because, Mark had brought up sorry, Mark, I'm going to put you on the spot, a number of times in public that he had heard that the engineering plan was such that that there were more than a few years left in the harbor, in the bulkhead. And so we just wanted to make sure in a public place that we discussed it and revisited it and found out what exactly the engineering results were.
I'll just make a comment. We spent over an hour reviewing it, physically looking
Right.
at it.
I agree.
Listening to the past harbor master, endorsing his thoughts. The waste. I mean, it's on the plan. I don't see the controversy here. Controversy.
Go ahead.
English.
My sense from from our meeting there is that John Rendon said there was $50,000
Left over from something.
yeah, that he could use for an engineering report to basically tell us, does this need to be imminently replaced or could it be extended? I heard from just some people around that it could be extended. The question I would have is, did John get that engineering report? Is there a written report? So we know how long before we need to replace the bulkhead. My question would be if it's not an imminent danger, that it could last up to 10 years, then do you need to do plans and permits so far ahead? So I guess my main question, Joe, is was there a request of an engineering company to take a look at it? Did they give, if it's just a couple of years, it's the same as what we actually had.
Yep.
So did we get anything more on that for the $50,000 if in fact we did do that?
Sure, we did. And the 50,000 were funds available, as you've said, that the harbor master already had access to. And the design, the engineering report came back precisely as I've reported. You have time. It's not an urgent, get it done in 26, but you need to do further analysis and design work for a future replacement. In the report that I read, they talked about that you can get probably 2 to 4 years for XYZ portion of the bulkhead, and perhaps upwards of 10 for the other portions. So we do have those plans, we do have that information, but again, I'm going to go back to it. The ask right now is for $770,000 that will allow us to do design work and contemplate the permitting that's going to go with that. To me, that's money well spent in a time that we can afford that money. We can rely upon that. The bigger question will remain, and still remains, and in my mind remains, what is the true expanse of the construction itself? So to that, I will just tell you, and this is has been my philosophy. I think you'll all back me up on that. If you look at fiscal year 2028, there is a not a placeholder. There's a dollar amount of $9.9 million for that construction work. I would be the most relieved of all if that number does not come to pass in fiscal year 2028. It sounds like it may not have to come to pass in that year, and that the numbers could be smaller and in more tranches in the future years. But we still need to be doing the work and the analysis. So we have the engineering reports, we have the recommendation, we still have a need for the bulkhead replacement, design, and permitting. And again, for me, the biggest thing, I just want to try to make it clear, and I think you've all heard it for the years that we've all worked together. When we have funding sources available, I want to use them to the greatest benefit of the town. Now, in a little while, let me look at your agenda
The end
real
of the
quick.
agenda,
Yeah, review funding sources, thank you. I'm going to give you my latest update on all the funding sources. And we have significant funding sources to bear on the capital plan as it is and as it's been amended, meaning the $35 million. And so we have the funds. I'll go deeper into that, but I would urge that the project remain in fiscal year 26. I make no assertions whatsoever on out years yet. Furthermore, I will just put it out there because I think Mark had said it well, you hear things in the community, if you will. So to that point, when we're looking at fiscal year 27, with right now $21.8 million worth of projects, I think it's important to rely upon this plan and this process to signal to the community the things that are out there. But none of that should ever be construed as ironclad, hard, fast support. Because in that year alone, I can look at some equipment replacements, some vehicle replacements, some road replacements, on and on. And in the out years, $9.9 million for the bulkhead replacement per se, $2.5 million for other work. There's a lot of big ticket items out there, and that $58 million 5-year plan, I think I'll be the first to say it is now over $93 million, because we just added $35 million to the first year. The question to me is always about the funds. The funds are available because, if I may, Mark and Scott have already heard this when I presented at their public hearing on the budget. Free cash. I do not ascribe to the free cash as evil. I ascribe to the Finance Research Management Bureau of the Commonwealth says it's a critical component. And this year we have it. And this is recommended to be paid for by free cash.
Point of clarification.
Yep.
The 50 that was spent that found out something, is that going to be duplicated in the 770?
No, on the contrary.
So what did the 50 buy me?
Affirmation that we need to do something for Saquatucket Harbor Bulkhead.
Okay, and had we not spent, if that 50 had not been there and not been spent, would the 770, part of it, give me the same information?
Yeah, what I took from it is, and not that I'm not gonna create a $50,000 gave me this sort of value, but the $50,000 gave me comfort that it's no longer wood, that we're not looking at an imminent danger for that bulkhead.
Okay, the 770, a part of it is going to give us an extended view.
of what needs to be done.
The best design for what needs to be done for that. So the
And
50,000.
we have been going back and forth on that bulkhead For how many years?
Well, I think the 6 years I've been here,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just saying,
Yeah.
it's been a long time.
So now we
We have
know.
the money and
Now we know.
and if I could, so I'm trying to come up with a, what do the kids call it, a drop the mic moment or a, hot take, there we go, sports radio, right? So my hot take is I will always pay good money for design and analysis and engineering. It takes a lot to get me to do construction because construction's always complicated. Anyone that's ever done projects outside of, because I haven't, home improvement and what have you, once you pierce that wall or once you start something, your costs go up. But it's the analysis, it's the review, it's the design. What I really like about this part of the project is also the true understanding of the permitting. Because in this instance, the permitting isn't simply Conscom, and it's not simply the town. It is state and federal because of the waterways and all that. So there's a lot of complexities to it. So I will always pay good money for good design and analysis, and that will get me towards whether we pay
Wish we
good
had
money
done
for
that with the
construction.
middle school, sorry, I'm being fresh. Mark, did you have another?
Mayor?
Go ahead, Scott.
Yeah, so I haven't seen this $50,000 piece of work, but I heard just now that it seems like there's a part that's more urgent than another part. I heard 2 to 4 years and then something like 10 years. If that's broadly true, is there a risk that any of the design work will be stale by the time, especially that later portion of the project, is actually important to do? And parallel question, is it possible that any of the permitting analysis would be stale, especially on the part that doesn't need to be attended to quite as early?
So
Should we be doing something in design and permitting just for the more urgent portion of the bulkhead?
So I heard 3 different questions, because that was just the third one, I think, Scott. And if I remember correctly, so to the first question, well, can you try to repeat your questions?
I'll write down the notes and
I'm
get it.
just worried
We'll go through.
if any of the design or permitting analysis would be stale, especially for the portion of the project that won't happen potentially for 8 or 10 years from now.
So to me, the question of staleness comes into the accuracy of the request for proposals. That's why Megan and I take the classes that we take, but we have to craft a solid request for the information. And we have to embed in that the timeframes that we have. So I'm less concerned about staleness of the design, as it were. I'd be more concerned about the staleness of the permitting per se. But again, to try to speak plainly and simply, $770,000 should be more than enough money to do the next level of analysis and design that's required. We don't look to spend $780,000 worth of funds because we have 770. We're trying to set aside funds available for this effort. In doing the RFP and in reaching out to the marketplace, I'm immediately, as Chief Procurement Officer, going to get useful data about what the marketplace is saying to the issue. And so for me, what I'm looking for is a timeliness now. Again, when you see the information, my recollection was, listen, you've got to do something with X, Y, and Z within 2 to 4 years max. That could be, say, 3 million of the 10 million. It could be 7 million of the 10 million, I don't know. The overall point, and I think to Rich's earlier point, we know the Saquatucket Harbor bulkhead needs to be replaced. And even if it's in better shape than we expected, going back to a term that I have to rely upon all the time for procurement, it's ending its useful life. And you really run the risk when you go past engineered work that goes beyond its useful life. And I believe that's the relevant fact for all of this. So as far as staleness, no, and I think we can mitigate that in the short term with how we put out to the marketplace for the design work and the permitting analysis. But yes, staleness on permitting. You know, permitting for me is, without getting political, I think it's fair to say there's instability and unknown in both the markets and in government structure. That, you know, with activities that are going on in the federal government, we don't know yet what the Army Corps of Engineers and other related entities are going to look like. And we also, and
Or exist.
or exist, and based on whatever conditions we find exist, what that does to the state counterparts.
So would it be fair to say that you're comfortable with the construction as it sits on the plan in 2028 at close to $10 million, that we would reassess that, or your group would reassess
Yep.
that after they do all the planning, and maybe it would change in increments in the out years of the budget at some point in the future?
I am, and the word I heard that I'm going to grab onto is comfort. I have great comfort in the out years. They don't mean anything
I-
other than these are forecasts. I don't mean to diminish.
No.
You know, right now, there's a forecast of $22 million in projects in fiscal year 27, $16 million in projects in fiscal year 28. Well, if anyone's been watching me on that weekly series, not limited, but weekly, I've been saying for all matters, I am comfortable. I am very comfortable with where we're at and what headwinds I think we're going to face in fiscal year 26. I have far less comfort in fiscal year 27 for all the reasons I just said.
Right, which is
So
what
for
you
me,
said for your budget
I
message.
take comfort in it's an out year. I can jettison it if I have to,
Right,
Right.
and most likely will.
okay.
Pardon the expression with jettison, too close to jetty.
So can we get a motion that we agree that the plan as it is in the capital plan right now stay the same? Yes.
My recommendation parliamentarily is if any member is looking to change what you've already done, you've already endorsed it, it's already in the
Okay.
plan.
So we
So
don't-
I think it's really more accurate to see whether or not there's a change
Okay.
in that. That might be simpler.
Does anybody want to make a change in the current capital plan for the Saquatucket bulkhead replacement project between fiscal year 26 and fiscal year 30?
I just want a clarification.
Fiscal year 26,
26 is the
the
only one.
only one we're worried about.
I would agree with that. What
Okay.
we're trying to
The
deal
other
with
one's
is
just
funding
placeholders.
sources for the articles. Yep, I would agree with that.
I just want a confirmation. I'm basically agreeing with Joe, but what I just want to confirm. So what we're looking at now is instead of a full-on construction job, a potentially phased job. And this study that we're paying $700,000 for will give us the information we need to see what we need to imminently do and what we'll do in the future, and then next year, we'll change the capital plan accordingly.
Yes, so.
But also understanding that they may come back and say, based on cost, it makes sense to do it all at once.
Yes, but,
Could happen.
and if I could to answer directly, what I'm saying is, if town meeting affirms the funding for the design and permitting of the Saquatucket bulkhead replacement project, when we go to market, we're going to rely upon the engineering reports that exist, the recent ones, well, all of them, but most recently the recent ones, to say, based on this engineering analysis, the town is looking for design and permitting recommendations to account for the engineering recommendations going forward. And further, to allow the town to plan for future construction phasing. And so, yes, that's why I feel comfortable with all of this. What we're saying to the market is we've got the money to pay for it, both design and permitting. We won't use it in one fell swoop. We're relying upon recently concluded engineering analysis. Based on all of that, what do you recommend we do construction-wise, and how many phases and the dollar amounts? And I think, again, that's why I say it's money well spent.
Does it also tell you that the 770 is a number that in fact is real for what we are asking? My fear is what wastewater went 5 years ago, when somebody said it was going to cost 50 million, and when you got your bids back, it was like 85.
Yes, if I may, but remember, you're mixing in the sense that $670,000 is deemed to be sufficient design work on Great Sand Lakes. The construction costs have changed. I think 770 is sufficient to do the design work. I hold out zero emphasis right now on the construction cost. So
And
for
what gives
engineering,
you-
absolutely.
What gives you the knowledge or the affirmation that 770 is a good number?
So it's a little inside baseball, but procurement-wise, it's a consulting contract versus a construction contract. The consultants can stay within that because it's a thought product.
Will you be getting enough information at 770?
I
Or whatever
firmly
portion-
believe we will.
What portion of the 770?
Yeah, I firmly believe we will,
Okay.
absolutely.
Okay, so then I go, is there a motion to make any changes? Okay, no changes.
I would just, Madam Chair, I would just say that I originally voted against this project back in the fall or the winter. Based upon what I'm hearing now, I would not bring forward any idea to change what's in the plan. Hearing that the design folks will be sensitive to opportunities to phasing this project based upon the engineering report that described two different potential timelines for different portions of the project. So, long way of saying that I have nothing to say.
Okay, thank you, Scott.
But you said it well.
Eloquently.
But this was the one we had the most negative votes
was,
on
yes.
So
when
we're
we
good.
did that.
We're
So we're good. So let's move on now to the Harwich Elementary School. And I believe that the elementary school submitted you a budget show after we all met and presented,
Yeah, and they did, and so if I may, to sort of expedite, I'm recommending that the sum of $40,000, sorry, hang on, let me strike that. I'm adding $40,000 to the capital outlay plan for fiscal year 2026 to account for what has been identified as the Harwich Elementary capital need, which, as we know, is borne 100% by the town of Harwich, and it's $40,000 to replace existing smoke alarms.
smoke alarms. I thought it was the boiler.
No, so right now it says 40,000 for smoke alarms. So if I may, what the district has in their plan, see, no, let me stop. Let me try again. I was the horse's patootie that added Harwich Elementary School to the capital plan process after the town became responsible for 100% of the capital, because I wanted to be transparent. Transparency can sometimes have a way of biting you, and said horse's patootie. Because here's the problem. Whatever that number is on that line is not borne by anything other than the article, typically Article 5, support of Monomoy. So whatever their numbers are, the 40,000 is 100% the town of Harwich for the smoke alarms. They have $70,000 on their capital plan that went back several months for boilers at two different locations
For fiscal year '26.
for fiscal year '26.
That's also not on this.
It wouldn't be. Monomoy, so here's the
okay,
distinction.
okay, right, okay.
Monomoy projects, spoiler alert, middle school,
Yeah.
do not go on the town of Harwich's capital plan. The only reason I put the elementary school out there is to try to give everyone a true and accurate sense of all of the projects that the town of Harwich would be either 100% or substantially responsible for. Having said that, draft Article 5 already accounts for it. Whether we put it on the plan or not, it's going to go forward in the assessment, and I'm recommending that we pay for it. So the dollar amount, as I understood it, was 40,000 for smoke alarms. The other dollar amount for the boilers I would not put on
It's 'cause it's
because it's a
middle
mix, and I don't want to confuse
it's
it
a mix.
any more than it is.
I thought the ceiling or the limit was 50,000 to be on the plan.
Certainly is.
So why are we putting 40?
Other than transparency, there's no reason.
Because we can only see 100% of the.
I understand that,
elementary
but I have a problem with other departments saying, wait a minute, I had a 35 and it's not on here. I had a 47 and it's not on here. you know.
Well, it would raise the question, can the school issue
That's
debt
not
for
the point.
40,000 if
That's
it's
not
a
my
capital
point. My
item?
point is, from procedurally.
Yeah, no, I agree with you.
This plan only shows capital expenditures, I don't care from whatever department it's from, of 50,000 or greater.
Right.
We have said that from ad infinitum, whatever. We changed it. Used to be 25, it went to 50, and now we're saying, well, we got a 40 that's laying out there, let's show it. I got a problem if somebody says, well, you know, the senior center is putting in a new basketball court, and it's costing 37,000, and it's not showing. Well, okay. I'm just asking procedurally, does it have to show? Only because you put the title, you have
Right.
literally.
Yeah, so several points. No, it doesn't. The confusion that we're going through is going to be far greater at town meeting, and I hate confusion and I hate chaos, especially at town meetings. Whatever's going to be done at Harwich Elementary School, even though it's 100% borne by the town of Harwich, is going to appear in the assessment article and can be described there in greater detail. The 40,000, one could argue that it's not 50, but if you look at all of the projects over the 5 years, it exceeds 50. However, those numbers aren't changing because I don't know what they are.
They haven't given you any,
I haven't divined, they haven't gone through the process that they would normally go through. Now, that's not a criticism of them. At the time, the question was, do you have any changes to the capital plan? No, not yet. Their cycle is different than ours. So when the question comes up of, well, let me say it this way. Under presumed Article 13, adopt the capital plan. Mr. Moderator, through you to anybody, probably the administrator. What other capital projects are you aware of that are not in this plan? The middle school project that you'll see under Article 11, or you saw perhaps under Article 11, and elementary school work. Other than that, there are no other projects that were contemplated that aren't in the plan.
well, now
No
that.
good deed goes unpunished, Madam Chair.
Yeah, no. And I originally thought this had to do with boilers in the elementary school, so that
So-
was my bad.
In there, so what I'm referring
Yes,
to.
That's why I brought this up.
And I fibbed a little. When I got more water, I got more documents. But I was striving all day to find what the numbers are for the elementary school. And what I came across was what was presented to the select board. And I believe back in January. And it's an overall presentation on the district's overall budget. So there's a slide, if I may, that says the fiscal year 26 draft budget includes several items to continue the district's capital and maintenance plan. Now, at the bottom of that, so the headlines are school project cost notes. The bottom of that list is Harwich Elementary School, replace existing smoke alarms, $40,000. The notes are, the smoke alarms at Harwich Elementary School are obsolete and parts and replacements are no longer available. So far, so good?
Yeah.
You don't see any other reference to Harwich Elementary singularly. The other reference to Harwich Elementary is under school district, meaning both towns. Replace the high school and the Harwich Elementary School facilities vehicle. Not boiler yet. And then contribution to capital stabilization, et cetera, et cetera. So they handle capital differently. They should. The middle school project, which is not on this, by the way, but we know it's massive and it's coming, is not handled in our capital plan.
Correct.
So if anyone were concerned that, one, we didn't account for the project, we did, and we accounted for it earlier in the warrant, then they adopt the capital plan. So there's a sense of superfluousness, if I can say it. I can actually say it, but if you get my meaning. So that it would have already been voted,
Right.
because we're
in
paying it
order.
through the assessment.
Right, and I get that. It would be helpful if for the elementary school, that the schools submitted a capital budget the same way and timing that the because we have to pay for it, right? So I just think it's fair that it comes through the same way all our other departments do, so we have time to review it and we don't have this confusion.
What,
If I could, real quick.
Sure.
To be fair to the district, I believe when I heard from them is when we were concluding our process and they were beginning theirs. And so my commentary was, if you've got something to say about your overall capital, you should do it through the select board so that at least it's captured at that level, and I'll capture it elsewhere in the warrant. But when the time came back in the summer for all departments, there was no ask. And there was an indication at the time that they didn't expect changes.
is the treatment of the 40, should it be listed, the same treatment that's given to 65 in 27, 54,000 in 28, and 100, or 1,115,000?
Not necessarily. I mean, I think I understand the question, because when you get to that 1.1 million,
What is it?
right, and if that's a single project, well, first of all, those are out years for them as well. I think what we learned,
But is it purely dedicated from the fact that Harwich is paying for it, and it's only going to the Harwich Elementary School?
I don't know that.
Oh,
Right, I don't know that.
because if it...
What I do know is whatever it is still going to present itself through the warrant article that funds all things district, including the elementary school.
So are people thinking they're double paying because they double voted for it?
They could, they're not, they could think that, and I would try my best in less than 45 seconds to say they're not at town meeting.
So it could be showing this as an expense or a capital expenditure that in fact is covered somewhere else.
Right.
And I think, I'm,
Maybe it goes below the line. But we were originally asked to review the elementary school because it is all paid by Harwich. That's how this all
Which is why I
started,
added it to the
right?
plan, correct.
So if we're going to do it, right, we're supposed to do it, we're supposed to review it. It doesn't matter where it gets paid for in Article 11 or whatever, but that we know, Article 5.
my point is in the past. when
So
had-
should we put it below the line then?
My point is, in the past, if something had years to pay it out,
Right.
like this has,
You were buying,
it's blank in 26.
right.
And then there's expenditures, 27, 28, and 29.
Right.
And those expenditures historically were shown as one expenditure that's spread out 3 years. My thought here is now, if we put 40 and 26, does that 40 become part of the other three? Does it become a four payment payout? Or do the other three
Is
have
it
nothing?
standalone?
Or is it standalone?
It's a
'Cause if
it's a
it
standalone.
doesn't
It's
belong there.
standalone.
If it's standalone, it shouldn't be there.
Well, I also don't think we should be issuing debt for something that's under $50,000
But
either.
that's not the point. The point is. it
Sorry,
should-
never mind.
It isn't the point?
No. I thought you were going to say something different, so I have nothing to say.
No, I'm only looking procedurally. I don't care. Nobody's going to pick it up.
Yeah, this is up to you, Joe, whether you want to add it.
So for me, what I want everyone to take from the plan that you can, the plan that will be Appendix C is,
It's inclusive.
here's everything for 26, and these are the articles that we've either, are about to vote, which would not be that one, we would have already voted it.
Right.
Be aware of the out years, and these are other projects, including 1.2 million so-called for Harwich Elementary in the next 4 years.
What are you going to put the 40 in? That's my point.
I wouldn't at this point.
You wouldn't list it there.
Well, for several reasons. It's the late afternoon of March 20th, and I don't even know that the 40 was correct.
Got it.
Okay, we're good.
Okay.
And it's below 50.
Correct.
Yes.
Okay,
that's-
so no action on
That's the
that.
strongest point.
Okay,
Practically maintenance.
all right.
Exciting project.
Number 4, the Monomoy.
Well,
I
We have
just
to
want
take a
to,
vote that we're not changing anything on Harwich Elementary?
no,
No, okay.
I just want to say, for this next one, number 4 here, I had suggested to the select board that it's so late in the process and we don't know anything about this. That probably wasn't a good use of our time to review it now. I had suggested that, but it seems like they wanted it on this
Yep. At the risk of antagonizing my bosses, allow me to say that the Monomoy Middle School renovation project is not a capital project.
For our capital plan.
For the town of Harwich, it is not a capital project.
Right.
And I'll get into that in a minute. I was, again, trying to drop the mic, right? So it is not a capital project. It should certainly be debated under the article that stands for that project about capital projects for the district for sure, but if anybody wants to compare it to our capital projects. I think you all may have heard about the so-called letter that I penned and presented.
No, I didn't, so if you could share.
Briefly, makes great video and it's an ongoing discussion. But at the select board meeting in Harwich on the, what are we, the week of the 17th? Yeah, the week of the 10th. As we were discussing Article 4, operating budget of the town, Article 5, assessment budget for Monomoy, and Article 6, assessment article for Cape Tech, one of the board members had said, well, we haven't taken any action on these, but should we have the administrator pen a letter to the Monomoy School District suggesting they sharpen their pencils? And so another member said, yes, they didn't take a vote, but the sense of the select board was that I do in fact that. And I did, and I did it.
This was on their operating budget.
No, this is on everything to do with them.
Oh, okay.
Because that's what I covered in my letter. So I presented the letter last Thursday evening, so March 13th, under public comment. The letter is now available, I think, in the select board's packet. It'll be in the correspondence for next week. And in it, what I told them is, first, I have a directive from the board to send this letter. And the purpose of this letter is to urge you to analyze your budgets, all of your budgets. Within that, I compared the current operating budget, Article 4, just for my departments, and presently, that's 2.91% increase year over year. For the district, it was a 5.27% increase. So their departments are going up 5.27, mine's only going up 2.9. And my overall budget under Article 4 is less percentage-wise than the overall increase for the school district for their overall budget. I want to say 3.8 to 6.57 or something to that effect. I believe I was correct in also saying, and that furthermore, the entire budget for the Monomoy Regional School System exceeds my entire budget for all programs. That is to say, the large town, when compared to the town of Chatham and to the school district, the large town of the town of Harwich is smaller budgetarily than the school district is. These are all facts that I'm trying to put in my own way. And then last but not least, the total ask on the middle school project, were it to be on our plan, which it's not,
Right.
would represent the single largest project on the capital plan aside from wastewater construction. Again, we were talking 9.9 for Saquatucket bulkhead replacement. The middle school project is now at $11,507,030. It would have represented the largest single project outside of wastewater for the town of Harwich for the next 5 years. Now, having said that, Madam Chair, if I could, the question before the town of Harwich as to the town of Chatham is very simple, and if I may I read? Monomoy Middle School renovation project, draft Article 9, to see if the town will vote to approve of the $9,007,030 debt authorized by the Monomoy Regional School District to pay additional costs of renovating and reconstructing the siding and windows of the Monomoy Regional Middle School, including all other work incidental and related thereto. So now that I've read that, I believe that's accurate. However, there is a reference to this requires a Proposition 2.5 debt exclusion. So what it requires is, what's being asked of the towns is, do you approve of the debt authorization being done by the school district? So we are not authorizing this debt. The town of Chatham is not authorizing this debt. it is not going to be on our list of authorized and unissued debt. It is going to be on the school districts. And they have authorized, issued, and unissued debt. And they have a debt service, they have a bond rating. But what they don't have, as you've said, Madam Chair, is the ability to exclude and the ability to tax. But the question before the towns, in my opinion as a parliamentarian, is merely, do you allow the authorization of debt? And oh, by the way, for Harwich, if we're going to authorize it, we're telling everybody that our debt service in the future on that should be excluded from Proposition 2.5 debt. And there'll be a question on the ballot to that. The total project is 11.5 million. The total ask for the authorization is 9 million plus.
But we gave them, that includes that 2.5 million.
Because both towns authorized 2.5. And for Harwich, whatever our debt service is on the 2.5, the voters voted to exclude that last year. But this is not a capital project for the Capital Outlay Committee. So you can certainly analyze it. However, I think you might have lost Scott.
Okay.
By that I mean to say, for the record, he dropped off the meeting.
He doesn't want to hear this.
You might do the same analysis that I've done. If you look at the 9 million, it's small, just slightly smaller than Saquotucket. But if you look at the true current understood cost, 11.5, outside of wastewater, it's the biggest thing we'd be doing. That analysis is true.
And can I ask, I had heard that they weren't done the analysis. Is it done? Is this number final?
Yes.
And Mark, your committee is over and done with, or you're?
In terms of producing that cost, it is.
It
I mean,
is.
we're gonna have some ongoing meetings, but that's, we've
That is
completed
the-
enough so they can get this on the warrant.
So we don't have to vote.
I know, and and I will say it was Don Howell who really wanted us to weigh in on this, and I kept trying to say, no, I don't know what value we're going to add this late in the game. We didn't get involved in the details of, I mean, you were, Mark, I mean, obviously. But I don't know what we're supposed to do here.
Madam Chair?
I can tell you how I feel as a taxpayer, and,
Yeah. If I may, Madam Chair, members of the Capitol, I made you aware of an analysis that I've done of this project relative to the overall budget stuffs and all that. And I've told you that my analysis has come back with, if this were on our list, outside of wastewater, it'd be the biggest thing we plan on doing for the next 5 years.
right.
You can corroborate that, you can deny that, or you can just let it stand. But I think
I mean, at
you will
least
have
happy
done
to
your
see the
job.
2.5 million got deducted, because for a long time, that just seemed to be by the side, you know, like, so I'm at least glad that nobody's double counting that 2.5 million.
Right.
So we talked about it.
Right.
We did our job.
We're not doing, I mean, we don't have any movement on it.
No, I mean, we don't have any,
This was
you have
the-
your vote as a taxpayer at the town meeting, whether you want.
If this was the school committee or something else.
Right.
Yeah, or,
But no.
Right.
but I think whatever way this is going to be presented through those draft papers that Jill has, the people in that town meeting have to understand the enormity of that, and also that it's not the direct responsibility to Harwich, nor the other capital expenditures. It's not under
I
our
sort of,
cap fund.
you know how I feel about it, I disagree, because it is ultimately 77% our responsibility, you know,
But not through this committee.
not through this committee, I'm not saying that.
No, it's not what
But
it
just,
comes-
I'm just talking as a taxpayer, it is our, you know, we are gonna pay for
Somebody either
it.
from the finance committee or some citizen has to get up and say, hey,
Might want to know.
this
It
is
might
the
be
way you
me.
understand it.
This might be me.
Huh?
It might be me,
It's
I'm
probably
waiting
for
for
you.
We'll call it.
Charles.
Okay, what do you got?
That's one
can I
clerk
just-
to
So
another.
that should be in
I
the
did want to
agenda
ask one
notes?
question, and I
Might
can't.
want to have it available, because if someone asks why the vote's changed.
Yeah.
Sorry, Madam Chair,
Oh, you guys said there was a joint meeting, a public meeting between Harwich and Chatham about the schools. Has that already happened?
it has not happened. It's what's being referred to as a
Stakeholders.
by me, as a stakeholder group. So, 2 members of the Harwich Select Board plus me as administrator, 2 members of the Chatham Select Board plus Jill Goldsmith, the town manager, her finance director, who's a direct report of hers, mine if we have one, and then Dr. Carpenter, Mr. McMillan, and 2 members of the school committee.
And when
I
do-
believe it's April 8th. Don't hold me to that right now. It is meant to be a discussion amongst that group. I don't know that there's going to be public comment per se. Given that there are 3 public bodies that are represented, we have to handle it as a public body.
Okay, all right, just curious.
But that's coming up in April.
Okay, so we're done with all our new business. Oh, no, funding sources we're going to do next. Unless, do you think there's something we need to?
Question, you guys think you'll be done by 3, or should I find another room?
Oh,
Oh, we'll be done by 3.
Okay,
We're
thank
going
you.
to move fast.
If not, go use my car.
So, Madam Chair, member of the committee, what I will tell you is in the various articles that I have in draft form, the funding sources that I'm relying upon are other sources, debt exclusions, debt service payment with borrowing. I think I said that right. Free cash. So, draft Article 14 is capital outlay projects funded from various sources. For Harwich Channel, for the $26,000, it's from the cable fund. For the Harbor Master, for the vehicle replacement, it's from the Waterways Fund. For free cash, for facilities maintenance, it would be 204 Sisson Road, $265,000. 209 Queen Anne Road, DPW, $100,000, and Brooks Academy, $1,300,149. That total amount of $1,665,149. Harbor Master, Saquatucket Building Replacement, Design and Permitting, $770,000.
Is that still in free cash?
Is all free cash.
Okay.
Information technology, the technology reinvestment, and the electronic records content management of $350,000. And police department, police cruisers, $210,000, and equipment replacements, $51,000. And last, public works for vehicle replacements, $830,000.
Wait a minute, you went really fast there. Equipment
So
replacement?
what I'd like to do if I could, right, is $3,876,149 in projects is being funded through free cash,
Almost 4 million, 3,876, 149.
149. So very quickly, facilities maintenance through DPW, 1,665,149. Harbor Master, 770,000. IT, 350,000. Police Department, 261,000. And Public Works, 830,000.
So free cash was our friend this year, is that correct?
Certainly is, and again, thank you for that, because as I said, the finance, I think it's the FMRB endorses the use of free cash for capital and other projects, not for operating expenditures, and we certainly don't do that.
Yeah.
However, I want to take a moment to just talk about free cash. So, free cash was certified on January 28th in the amount of $5,821,439. I have a potential use of $500,000 for an OPEB contribution, supporting the Cultural Council for $4,000, supporting other libraries for $20,000. And so with that and with the capital, that would expend $4.4 million of free cash. I still have a balance of $1.4 million in free cash.
Is that going in that rainy day fund we talk about?
No, it's not going into stabilization because technically speaking, we have too much.
Oh,
We're exceeding what our policies recommend we have. However, if I don't use free cash, it goes back into the general fund and it becomes free cash. So if we want to keep free cash low, we want to spend free cash when we have it.
yeah.
So that's for free cash. That's draft Article 15, draft Article 16. So this is the one I was talking about before. So to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate or borrow the sum of $2.5 million to fund the Cranberry Valley Golf Course. So it's a borrowing, but it's not a borrowing that we need a debt exclusion because all of the debt is paid for directly through the golf course. So they almost have enough funds available that they could have potentially paid the project. Instead, it's a 20-year useful life project. We're going to spread the 2.5 million out over 20 years so that the golf course has more than enough money to pay the annual debt service.
Oh, got it.
Draft Article 17 is using $100,000 from the Water Department's retained earnings from the Enterprise Fund, and that's for their $100,000 project on pipe discontinuity upgrades. For wastewater, it is $150,000 for vehicle replacements, and we do have sufficient wastewater retained earnings from their wastewater
do.
enterprise fund. Sufficient for this purpose. And then additional debt exclusion, debt exclusions. I might have to change my notes. At present, there is a $2.4 million borrowing question for the fire department. So it's $1.1 million for ambulances and $1.3 million for a pumper and fire engine. So in my notes, we had $700,000 for road maintenance improvements that were originally going to be excluded from debt, as we used to do in the past. However, I believe road improvements can be funded through Chapter 90 because we have I think it was the millionaire's tax or whatever. That money comes back to the town for roads. And our numbers are excessive in a good way. We're looking at the potential for having over $1 million, perhaps up to $1.3 million for Chapter 90. So we'll use it for those purposes rather than for debt exclusion or borrowing.
So does that mean you're not going to pay the $700,000 for DPW for the roads?
No, it means the $700,000 will be paid for through Chapter 90.
All, and plus what, okay, all right.
Just a quick question. Formerly, that used to be on the capital plan, and one of the board members said they didn't see it. Where will that?
So we do have it presently. If you look under Public Works, the first line is road maintenance / improvements, $700,000 a year.
So it's in the regular budget?
No, it's in the capital plan.
Oh, it is, okay.
The trick with that comes from the legal procedure of, if you're using Chapter 90 money, you technically don't need a vote of anything to use Chapter 90. If we have the money available, the town, through the administrator, select board, and DPW director, is allowed to use the funds for that purpose.
So we won't have a vote on it, then? That's, you know...
We're not going to do a debt exclusion right now. And I say that, hopefully my last comment, in the sense that there's obviously a lot of articles going into the warrant and a lot of depth and gravity to it, if you will. The town election warrant is massive. It has the significant charter commission question, which is a straightforward question, but then it will be at least a list of at least 9, I think, candidates. Then we have charter amendments that we were already contemplating, and then we have 3 debt exclusion questions, 2 of which we just talked about, and 1 of which is for the middle school project. And now I heard from the clerk that there is a non-binding referendum from a advocacy group. So even our town election ballot is massive, with a lot of moving parts.
Can I just ask one more question about Chapter 90 funds? So normally we would do $700,000 that would get paid for by debt and $700,000 that was Chapter 90. You're saying this year the $1.4 million is all Chapter 90.
So what we anticipate from the Commonwealth is we got our, call it roughly $700,000 in
Yeah.
Chapter 90. That was confirmed. We're looking to get another tranche, I believe, of the millionaire's tax. I think that's where it came from. And if memory serves correctly, there was one other thing that's happening that's causing our number to go up. So where we have typically $700,000 available, we're going to have close to or over $1 million available. So that's how we would use those.
Okay.
Last but not least, the director, his road improvement plan is still in place. Just remember, however, that when we're doing sewer construction, that tends to be where we do the road improvements to start.
And he pays for his drainage out of that, right?
Stormwater would be out of that as
Yeah.
well, but that would be future considerations.
Any other questions?
Do we have to meet again before town meeting?
No, I don't think we do. This was a cleanup of
How many
everything.
more days for town meeting?
Less than I need, more than, less than
Come on,
6.
you got it on your board.
No, not anymore. No, I stopped doing that.
He did,
Um,
he used to give us a rundown.
Oh, my God.
Well,
stressful.
but thank you. You made my point. You all now think in terms of how many days till town meeting. Because when I first got here 6 years ago, we weren't doing that.
No.
So thank you for doing that. And I have
We
no
now
idea.
do.
It's less than 60.
What date is town meeting?
Monday, May 5th. I can tell you that the town election is exactly 2 months from today.
May 20th is election, May 5th is town meeting.
You got it.
May 5th?
Yep.
May 5th and 6th, it sounds like.
Oh, yeah. We're going to stop there for right now. We're not going to imagine anything beyond that.
Well,
No.
Am I right?
thank you, Joe, for
Thanks for
Joe.
putting
having
together.
this meeting and.
My pleasure, and thanks
We
again.
cleaned everything up, I feel like, and
Yep.
I'll go to the meeting on Monday and list out, with your help, what we did.
Yep,
And
absolutely.
if I can get a motion to
Make a
adjourn.
motion that, new teeth. I make a motion that we adjourn.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And Scott's not here, so we don't have to do a head count.
Thank
Thank
you,
you,
Joe.
everyone. I really appreciate this.
I gotta hit Natasha up, is that okay for a few minutes? Oh, yeah.
We've only had one
I've only
quick